Okay, so you wanted an announcement, right? So, we are going to be discussing the story of Pinchas, the zealot. But before we do that, we're going to read from the Hayom Yom, which are these daily little mini teachings that Chabad, the previous Rebbe, put together, and our Rebbe collated them. Menachem Mendel Schneerson, he collated them. And so each one of them is a gem, and today's one is actually about meditation, which is a nice topic to give our attention to. And welcome to Corina. There she is. Hi, Corina. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. Baruch Hashem.
Good.
Thank you.
It's good to see you. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
So today being the 20th of Tammuz, actually my son's birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, Ruthie's birthday. So there are three kinds of meditation. Meditation associated with study. After a person understands a concept thoroughly, he meditates on its depth until its intellectual content illuminates him. So this is, you put something in your head, you've learned some new idea, and then you kind of keep thinking it through, and like you're chewing it, doing that chewing idea until it starts to penetrate. And that's how we can say Chabad, the movement of Chabad, the philosophy of Chabad is coming from those three words: Chochmah, which is an idea, wisdom, a new idea; Bina, which is the process of chewing something and kind of like thinking on it and internalizing it. Bina, that's Bina. And then Da'as is kind of internalized knowledge. So in a way, this chewing and this meditating on something, that's kind of the Bina process. So that's one kind of meditation. You're really thinking through a concept, trying to internalize it. The next kind of meditation that it's mentioned is meditation before praying. And the point here is to experience the vitality of the concept that one has studied, not its intellectual aspect, as in the case of meditation associated with study. So you're going to start praying and you want to bring to your conscious mind one of those ideas that you studied, but now to put it into, for it to energize your prayer. So you meditate before praying so that you can really connect to the vitality of this idea, not so much intellectually, but more, I guess, experientially, so that when you're praying, you can really pray with that connection to the thought and the idea. And then the last category is meditation during prayer. And the idea here is while you're praying, to really connect to the divinity within
before you enter the
all of the worlds, the divinity of Hashem, divinity of the particular prayer that you kind of praying, but you're really trying to connect to the life force within, it says here, within the concept one has studied, but it's really an application to the words as you doing it. They're a little bit, I guess the second one and the third one are a little bit similar, just one is you meditating, the second one you're meditating as a preparation for prayer, and the third one is while you're praying, you're really trying to connect to that life force within the words and within the concept and that divinity within whatever it is you're praying about. And then in conclusion, it says, these are three rungs on the ladder of spiritual sensitivity. And at times, solely due to Hashem's grace, one senses divinity without any form of service. You just feeling that divinity, but you're not learning or davening, you're just experiencing the world. Maybe you're in a garden, a forest, you see a beautiful piece of nature and you're just experiencing that. This is a result of the essential quality of the soul. However, with regard to divine service that stems from our own initiative, the above 3 steps are necessary. So there's a footnote, but basically what this is saying, and then I'm happy to hear comments or responses, that you can get an experience of, you can get a sense of divinity without working on it, without working on learning about what the prayers mean, meditating on a topic that you studied, a Torah topic. You can get that. And that's a result of the quality of a person's soul. But if you're going to serve God, and it's not just a gift of a moment where you get like a, whoa, what an incredible moment this is, but it's more something that you're working towards, then if you're working towards something, these 3 steps could be helpful. You meditate on a concept. Before you pray, you try and connect to the idea of these concepts that you studied. And then while you're praying, you really try and be present to the divinity within the words. There is a footnote, and the footnote is really going to just give a little more explanation about the philosophy of Chabad, that when we're talking about spiritual things start with a construct or a way of thinking about things. It starts in the mind. Chochmah, Bina, Da'as. Wisdom, internalization, and then real grasp and real knowledge and real intimacy with the concept. And it says here in the footnote, the emotions are volatile and they're responsive to external stimuli and they're less easily controlled. But through the mind, only through the mind, we can harness and mature, and our thoughts can come under our control, and we can commit ourselves to disciplined and intellectual effort. It sounds like this is a lot of intellectual stuff, but what it's really saying is that if you train yourself to have the right ideas in your head, such as God's in control, God makes the decision of how much money you make or you don't make, God decides when, different things. If you have that construct in your mind, it can influence how you're going to be emoting. And it's not that the emotions start off and they can go this way or that way. Chabad Hasidus says, get the constructs in your head and they will then impact on the emotions. But it continues the footnote, at the same time, our lives shouldn't be cerebral because then we'll lack vitality. And so prayer, which has this meditative aspect, and it's even meditative while you're doing it, this bridges the gap between our minds and our hearts and can influence the way we live. So meditative prayer that therefore spurs the heart, directs its expression, motivating us to integrate spiritual concepts into our everyday lives. And in that way, we grow. So in a Jewish, in this context, prayer is work, really. You're working, it's work of the heart to integrate and to connect and to relate to some of the ideas that you learned intellectually. So any comments? Because I will go on to another topic, but I would love to hear if there's any response to that, because this is a little bit of an interactive learning, not just me lecturing. So does anyone have anything to say?
Mm-hmm.
Shulamit, I had a feeling you might have something to say. So let me hear the question.
But I think somebody else raised their hand first. So
No, go for it.
Oh, okay. Oh God, I'm being rained on like really badly. So The thing that I was thinking about actually was the I Ching. And I was thinking about how ancient this understanding is, almost of the higher self, the lower self. You know, the lower self meaning the emotional self that wants to govern us and does a really good job with it. And that we have to find mastery through, I'm sorry if I'm making you crazy going up and down. I can get off video. Hold on.
No, 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 no,
No, I like, it's okay. It's fine.
Okay. Okay. As long as it's okay with you. So, yeah, so that the mind has to find a way to be the master. And,
Right.
you know, I've been practicing surrender recently with everything that's going on, which I want to influence, but I know I can't control. And at the same point, I know that it's a spiritual opportunity constantly being given to me to stretch. And for me, surrender is big. And so I've been taking cold showers, like not immediately cold showers, but like a hot shower and then a cold shower. I tried just a cold shower and I didn't have the courage for that again, but ending it with a cold shower, because then you're shocked. There's an experience of being shocked, and then you have a choice. You can cringe or pull inwards and try and control it, or you can surrender into it and allow. And so I've been using my mind that way recently to basically practice not allowing that other part of me to take over.
Okay. Thank you. That is really a very helpful and putting it into practical terms. So thank you very much for your comments and your responses. Susan, you wanted to comment? Susan?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Shlamis, hi, never met you before. And I'm so glad you chose to came on, because what you said were the words I needed to hear. Dealing with
thank you.
difficult
Thank
situation.
You. That's wonderful.
And surrender is something I too also been working on. And thank you for that. Thank you very, very much. The comment was very short, that this idea that prayer is work.
Yeah, prayer.
Oh my God, is it work? I mean, I
Right.
work on it every day, and then I could be like so detached to the words, and my mind is racing on things, or I could just go in slow motion and really be in touch with the beauty and the words and the connection. But it is work. Thank you.
Well, that's why in Hebrew, prayer is called avodat halev,
Good.
work of the heart. And we have
Very
like
good.
a whole big book of, I think the Siddur is a book of philosophy, really, Jewish philosophy. And as we're praying, we connecting to all these ideas and these constructs that are giving us hope and faith and kind of a baseline and a construct in which we live in. It's not just.
I think that the Siddur is also 50% of the Siddur is the same words over and over, and they're the most beautiful words. The ahava, the compassion, the MS, the connection. It's repetition of the most beautiful things. Like, you could really not know Hebrew and know a handful of words and feel so connected.
Right. All right. So thank you for those beautiful comments and participatory involvement, which I very much enjoy. Okay, so we're moving on. And we're going to get involved with a nice piece of anti-Semitic politics that happened in the Bible times. And really, in order to talk about this week's Torah reading, we have to go back to last week's Torah reading, which was all about Balak. It was called Balak. The name of last week's Parsha was Balak because Balak was a king who, as we discussed in our class, which was on retreat, not here, but there, Balak got very fearful of the Jews. It says that he saw with extra sensory perception because he wasn't there, the Jews engaging in a war with the Amorites. And the footnote on Rashi says that he was able to see, I guess he could do long distance vision seeing, which is interesting because he was some kind of magician, psychic, something or other. And he got terribly afraid. And it says that his nation, the Moabites, were consumed and sick with fear about the Jews coming into their land. And we mentioned that verse that it says that the Jewish people would lick up all their grass the way an ox licks up from the field, leaving it completely, barren. And it was really unpleasant terminology. And so he doesn't know what to do about this nation of Israel coming. So he hires another sorcerer, magician, kind of magic man whose name is Bilam. And we know that Bilam was a very powerful person. He was actually a prophet of God, even though he was non-Jewish. And it says that just like God gave the Jews Moshe as a prophet, in order for the nations not to complain that it's an unfair situation that the Jews have a person like Moshe who's so connected, and who do they have? So they got Bilam. So Bilam was one of the advisors of Pharaoh. He's the person who designed the Jewish solution in Egypt. And now Balak, the king of Moab, consults him and says, listen, these people are really bad for us. They're going to take all our resources. They beat our enemies. They're very powerful. Maybe we heard that they have tremendous blessing through the power of their mouth. We're just talking now about blessings and prayer and whatever. Moshe is their leader, and he's a prophet, and he blesses them, and they're blessed by God. Maybe you can use your mouth and curse them. And so that's the whole thing, that Bilam is trying to curse them, but it would make a great movie. Every time he opens his mouth to curse them, blessings come out. And Balak eventually says, listen, what are you doing? I paid you all this money to curse the Yidden. I mean, if you can't curse them, so just be quiet. But every time you're opening your mouth, blessings are coming out. So he blesses the Jews 3 times, and there's some famous blessings in what he says to the Jews. One of them is incorporated into our davening. How goodly are your tents, O Bnei Israel. The way you conduct your family life is so holy, it's beautiful. But in the end, Bilam says, listen, I wasn't able to get them with the curse, but I have another idea. So before I tell you about the other idea, I just want to tell you what is a curse and what is a blessing. So we discussed, we were talking last week that a curse, the word for curse used in the Parsha with Bilam is ara. It's the letter Aleph, Resh, Hey. And basically, this word for curse is very similar to the word for light, which is the word or, which would be spelled Aleph, Vav, Resh. So ara, if I left out the hey at the end, let's just say I said ar, the word ar for a curse, and the word for light is or. And they're almost the same letters, but the word for light has the vav, a straight line, like a conduit. And basically we were saying that a curse is something that tries to cut off this connection, this vav, this sinor, this attachment of the Jewish people to God. So Bilam was thinking he'll curse them, he'll break this connection between God and the people. But what happened is God kind of didn't let him curse them. Every time he opened his mouth, he said things that gave them extra blessings and kind of brought down more of their connection to God. So a curse is an attempt to make a break between God between God or the source of blessing and the one that's receiving. If you can somehow cut this channel coming from above, going down to below, that's supposedly the intent of a curse. So Bilam says to Balak, he says, I wasn't really successful in cursing them. Somehow every time I opened my mouth, God intervened. But I have another idea. God really values the Jewish people's morality, and he loves that they are people who are very committed to family and to family purity, and they have a holiness about their family relationships. If we can tempt them into the Jewish men, if we can tempt the Jewish men into having relations with the Midianite woman, then God won't be so happy with them. And maybe that connection, that sinor, that flow down of blessing from above to below to the Jewish people can somehow be severed. So Bilam gets to work, and he gets all the lovely Midianite women to volunteer for market service. Market service is, let's set up a pop-up market, like a farmer's market, right outside the Israeli encampment, and we'll staff all the tables with the very beautiful girls, and all those girls will, be selling materials, fabric, etc., spices, I don't know, nice clay pots, who knows what they were selling, perfumes. And then they'll entice the men into conversation, and they'll get extra points if they have their best goods in the back room in some kind of storage area, in a tent in the back. And then they'll entice the male customers to go and look for more special produce in the back, and then they'll get them into relations. And this way we'll not only mess up the purity of the Jewish nation, but we'll also get these men to start worshiping the idols of the Midianites. It's a great plan. And what actually happened is that the Jews fell for it, and lots of Jewish men began to have relations with Midianite women. And not only did they have relations, but they got pulled into the Midianite service idols, avodah zarah, strange worship, and got more and more alienated from serving God. So that's what happened last week. And at the very end of last week's Parsha, we had a very disturbing incident. I'm just going to pull up the reading, and I'll pull up the reading of last week, because last week's Parsha, even though it was Balak, at the very end of it, we have a very interesting incident that happens, and it became really the whole point of how we start this week's Parsha. So it's at the very, very end, and this is what happened. So then an Israelite man, so there's a whole lot of things going on, and people are serving this here. So if you have a screen, you can look on the screen. If you don't have a screen, I'll read it to you. It says Israel settled in Shittim, and then the people began to commit harlotry with the daughters of the Moabites. I'm sorry, not the Midianites, but the Moabites. And they invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and prostrated themselves to their gods. That's exactly was Bilam's plan. Now remember, Bilam was hired by the king of Moab, and so this is the Moabites, but it was the suggestion of Bilam. And Israel became attached to the idol of Baal Peor, and the anger of Hashem flared against Israel. So this is a total ploy for assimilation and, messing up the spirituality of the Jewish people. And then Hashem said to Moshe, take all the leaders of the people and hang them before Hashem, facing the sun, and the flaring anger of Hashem will be removed. Like Hashem says, this is really making me angry. And there's a way that we can stop this. We're going to be very politically incorrect, and we're going to execute a judgment. And Moshe says to the judges, each of you, anybody who's gotten involved in this tremendous idol worship, which is, I guess they were feeding their children to, I mean, it was horrible, horrible avodah zarah, idol worship, of strange worship. And then look what happens at the bottom. It says, an Israelite man came and brought the Midianite woman to his brothers before the eyes of Moshe and before the eyes of the whole congregation of Bnei Israel. And while they were weeping at the entrance of the tent of meeting, so all these people are kind of crying and confused, and they're all outside this holy sanctuary of the Mishkan, this tabernacle in the desert. And then when what happens, one of the priests, one of the princes, I'm sorry, of the Bnei Israel, his name is Zimri, he comes in front of everybody and he brings a princess, a Midianite princess, to his brothers, and in front of everybody, he goes into the tent, and it's obvious that they're going to have relations together. And this is quite a dramatic moment in the Jewish people. They've received the Torah at Mount Sinai. They're supposed to be on their way into Eretz Yisrael. They got their 10 commandments. They got the extension of the 10 commandments. One of them is don't serve idols. And now all these men are serving this idol. They got involved with these women. And now a prince of the tribes of Israel, a prince, comes and brings a very high, a Midianite woman. Well, I guess the Midianites and the Moabites are getting kind of mixed in this effort to derail the Jewish people from their relationship to Hashem. This Midianite woman, she's a princess, and in front of Moshe and in front of all of Bnei Israel, this man Zimri basically comes and he says, all these rules that you have, all this tribal stuff, all this thing about the purity of the Jewish people, it's all nonsense. I'm into assimilation, and this woman is very beautiful in my eyes, and who cares that she's a princess of Midian? Who cares that I'm a prince of Israel? Who cares about the 10 commandments? Who cares about us being a nation with a particular mission? Who cares about all of that? I'm into, let's be a melting pot. Let's just, free love. And he walks into a tent, and it's like, see if you can stop me. I don't care about you. So this is what happens. It's pretty dramatic. I'm just going to bring the Rashi in and see if what Rashi says here. So Rashi is our commentator, and he brings extra details. So he's from the tribe of Shimon, and then everybody is kind of confused. And then what happens? Pinchas, who's the son of Elazar, who is the son of Aaron the Kohen, sees what's going on, and people aren't sure what to do. Moshe somehow gets confused. Everybody gets confused. They don't know what's going on. They're crying. This is terrible. This is like a real injustice. And it says that Pinchas, he was young. He went into the tent and he executes judgment, and he actually kills both Zimri and Cosby. It's very, very dramatic. And he takes matters into his own hands. And then it says that this action that he did actually appeases Hashem, and there was a plague, and this action that he did actually stopped the plague, and it appeased Hashem's anger, because Hashem was feeling very, very sidelined. It's a little bit strange to talk about Hashem and talk about anthropomorphisms, but we'll see in this week's Torah reading, because the story ends at the end of last week and then it goes right into this week's Torah reading. And if I read in the Hebrew, it's very interesting. It says, "V'yedaber Hashem el Moshe lemor," and Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, and what does Hashem tell Moshe? He says, "Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron hakohen heshiv et chamasi." He has turned my anger. And I want you to notice the name for anger written right here in the Torah is Hamas. So that's a very interesting synchronicity. So Hashem says, he has turned es Hamas, he has turned my anger, ma'al b'nei Israel, from b'nei Israel, but kanoi, with his zeal, his zealousness. Es kanasi b'tocham v'lo kalisi es b'nei Israel b'kanasi. And Hashem says his zeal, his zealousness in defending my name and my values, his zealousness has actually turned away my zealousness that I would have had to destroy the people. I was so disgusted and I was so insulted, and I felt so, I felt that the very principles to which I've created this nation to uphold was so in danger that Hashem is saying, so to speak, my zealousness was actually pacified by Pinchas's actions. And then he says, and this is like a very interesting idea, he says, Lachein, therefore, emor hanani hinani nosein lo et brit hashalom, brit shalom. Therefore, I give him my covenant, my bris of shalom, of peace. So because he was a zealous and he took a stand and he actually killed these people who were doing this tremendous act of, like, I don't know what the word is, insult and dragging everything that Hashem stands for into the mud, he gets the covenant of peace, which is an interesting thing. And then it says, Vahayisa lo ulazaro acharav brit kuhunas olam. And it should be for his descendants, for him forever, tachat asher kana lelohei v'yakaper el b'nei Israel. He should have, and his descendants should have forevermore the covenant of kuhuna, because he was zealous for his God, and he did a kapara, he did an atoning for the B'nai Israel. So that's kind of dramatic. And Rashi actually says that Hashem comes and he defends Pinchas, because if you look at the Rashi here under Pasuk 11, it says that the tribes were disparaging Pinchas. And they were saying, look at Pinchas, the son of Puti. And who was Puti? His mother's father was an idol worshiper. His mother's father was Yitro. He gave fattened cows for idols. Who does he think he is? And now he comes and he kills a priest of the, a prince of the tribes. And then Hashem says, I know who this Pinchas is. He's the son of Elazar, the son of Aaron, and he gives him the kuhuna. He gives him the right to be a priest. Now, because of some timing and the way the priests were appointed, Pinchas was not going to be a priest. The priests were the descendants of Aaron, and Pinchas was somehow left out of that counting. But through this act, he got to be a priest and his descendants forever after him. And he also gets this covenant of peace. And the Rashi says on this covenant of peace, just as a man owes gratitude and favor to someone who does him a favor, here Hashem expresses to Pinchas his feelings of peace. So we're going to open it up to conversation in a minute, because I'm interested in what you think about standing up and taking a stand, even if it looks like, you know, Torah doesn't justify violence, but in this case, Pinchas is rewarded. I'll just read this last piece from Rashi. Although the kahuna, those who were priests, had already been given to Aaron's descendants, it had been given only to Aaron and his sons who were anointed with him and their children. Pinchas hadn't been born yet, so he was not included, but now he earns this right. And then when it says that he acted in the name of Hashem, that he was zealous for Hashem. And let me see if there's anything else I want to say before we open it up to conversation. Oh, the other thing to just let you know is that the enemies of Israel were so committed to this derailing of the Jewish people that the Torah now tells us who was this Midianite woman. She was Cosbi, the daughter of Zur, not Sur, but Zur, I'm sorry. And who was Zur? He was a national leader of a big paternal house in Midian. And Rashi says, the Torah is telling us who she is to inform you how much hatred the Midianites had towards Israel, that they actually allowed one of their princesses to go into prostitution just to entrap and ensnare the Jewish people. So it's not like this Midianite princess didn't have her own people and her own suitors in her own house, but she was put into this mission of drawing the Jewish men into relations, you know, as a national service. And then it says that Rashi tells us that this Zur, he actually got a little bit demoted because he degraded himself by abandoning his daughter to this prostitution. So, and now because of what happened, we know that there was a plague, and the plague got stopped because of this action, and the Jewish people somehow got pulled back into alignment through this action of Pinchas. So I thought that, you know, in our present times, when there's a lot of things that are going on that we see contradicting our values, sometimes putting our families in danger, sometimes putting our values in danger. Like, what is the value of the zeal? You know, the people weren't impressed with Pinchas. They were mocking him. They were saying, Pinchas, like, you know, your grandfather was an idol worshiper. Now you're taking this big stand. You know, who do you think you are? And they even said to Moshe, like, what's the big deal? You yourself took a princess of Midian to be your wife. Moshe's own wife, Tzipporah, was actually the daughter of a big prince, a big priest of idol worship. But we know that he did tshuva, and he came and he joined the Jewish people at Har Sinai. His name was Yitro. And we talked about how the whole Parsha, the whole story of the Jews receiving the Torah is named after Yitro, because Yitro went and joined the Jewish people and said, now I know there's only one true God. And he did a total turnaround, this Yitro. And Moshe married Tzipporah before the Torah was given. And before it was said, you know, all the rules and regulations that were set up. How different is the world now after the Torah was given compared to before? If Moshe could marry Tzipporah, Zimri is saying that he can marry Cosby, but the world's changed. Now the Torah has been given. So some food for thought and conversation. I'm interested in hearing comments and questions and responses. I mean, this is just like a little piece, a little bite, a little, you know, opening the conversation for further investigation and analysis and learning. This is just a beginning. There's a lot of topics spilt about this. What is peace? What is the definition of peace? Just before we go into the conversation, I just want to write out the name of the word peace. And I want you to see a very interesting thing. And I don't know if you'll see it on the screen because the screen will put it into a mirror image. But I just want you to think about the word peace, because what did Pinchas get? He got a covenant of peace. And what is peace? Okay, so I'm holding up my book here, and I want you to see that the word shalom, even though it's written sort of backwards here, that's the shin. It's like a square, or let's say it's the bottom of a box with the line dividing in the middle, the shin. Then you have a lamed, which is connecting higher and lower. The vav, we say is this connecting letter. And then the mem is a box. It's a fully formed box. It's almost the same. If I took this middle line of the shin and just put it across the top, it's almost the same as the mem over here. So if I would write it again, and I wouldn't put in the vav, and I just wrote the shin, because you could write it without the vav. You could write it without the vav, and then it's even more clear. You've got the shin, the lamed, and the mem. And if I took that middle line of the shin and I put it across the top, it's almost the same on each side. You've got the mem with 4 lines, like making a box, and the shin with 4 lines. It's just that middle one, I could put it across the top, and it's an exact balance. So if I ask you what is peace, and I say that's your hint, and I'll give you another hint before I ask you the question. Shin is a letter that's connected with fire, and mem is a letter that's connected with water, because shin, aish is fire, aleph, shin, aish. And mem is a letter connected with water. It's mem, yud, mem. Mayim is mem, yud, mem. So here's peace, and on one side you have fire, and the other side you have water, and then in the middle you've got some kind of, you know, connecting thing. So what do you think is peace? Why did Hashem give Pinchas not like some other kind of prize? Why did he give him the covenant of peace? What is peace? And what do you think of the whole thing? Now I'm waiting.
I want to understand the covenant of peace thing. Pinchas was a zealot. He took a stand for God. He killed somebody and he was given kohanas. What's the covenant of peace come into that?
Well, in the actual words, Hashem says, tell him, therefore, that I am hereby granting him my covenant to be a covenant of peace. And what is and what does Rashi say? What is that covenant of peace? Like a person who maintains a gratitude and grace to one who does him a favor, here the Holy One's source of blessing spread over him his manifestation of peace. A footnote on the spread over him. We have translated, so let me just read to you what it means spread over him, because that's a good question. a covenant of peace, et brit shalom, yud beis, lechen emor hineni nosein lo es bris hashalom. So this covenant of peace, let me look in the footnotes. Footnote. My covenant shall be for him as a covenant of peace. And then there's another footnote. The Holy One, source of blessing, spread over him his manifestations of peace. So let's see. His wish to bestow his peace upon him as an indication of his gratitude to him. It doesn't actually tell us so much more over here. Covenant lasting peace. I don't have that information, so what it means, except we know, what does peace mean? What does the word shalom mean? What is shalom? What do you know about shalom?
I love that on the retreat, they talked about shlemus and shalom.
Shalom.
And I'm intrigued by that connection.
So shalom and shlemut are coming from the same roots, and shlemut means a completeness, a wholeness. And the word shalom that I showed you indicates some kind of a balancing, some kind of an equilibrium, some kind of something that's not out of sync. You've got the water and the fire. You know, the word for shamayim, which is heaven, is also a combination of fire and water. It's indicating some kind of a balance, some kind of an equilibrium, some kind of a holding. So in Shemayim, you have fire coexisting with water, which is like a miraculous thing because it can't really happen. So that's what makes it heaven, because it's this, you know,
That's the answer to your question.
Okay, so tell me what I just said.
No, that, yeah, the one represents fire, one represents water. What do they have in common with the word? And then you said it's miraculous when they come together.
So why is Pinchas's action something that brings down a sense of peace? Why does Hashem give him this brit of shalom? This brit.
First of all, it looks crazy what he does, and it seems outrageous, and it's so hard to understand. But then Hashem's saying someone who speaks up for his name when his name is being in the dirt because of not doing the things they're told not to do, that is righteous. It just goes against our nature to get up and just kill somebody. But that's fire. That's the contradiction that seems so crazy, and yet it was so holy, is like fire and water.
So that's an interesting explanation. By the way, it wasn't just that Cosby and Zimri were being together. They were being together in a very public fashion, right in front of the whole congregation. They were making a very public statement. You know, they were really, I'm sort of tempted to lift some of my fingers in a very rude gesture, but I'm not going to do it because this is a Torah class. But they were really, it was really a public statement of, we don't care for what this nation is supposed to be standing for. And the halacha, by the way, there's an interesting, like halachically, nobody would be obligated to do what Pinchas did, but to volunteer for that was something that he got rewarded to. But halachically, according to Jewish law, and there was a law about this, and Moshe forgot the law, and he got confused about the law, and then the people were all crying, and then Pinchas knew that there is a place where what he did was correct, but of course, he must have faced tremendous criticism, and Rashi even brings it that Hashem had to kind of defend his name to all the people, and not only that, but they're all criticizing him and saying, who does he think he is? And then Hashem has to call him Pinchas, the son of Elazar, who was the son of Aaron. And then we know, in fact, that Pinchas gets reincarnated as Eliyahu. So bringing in just the Zohar, I mean, I don't know if I can make sense of these reincarnations, but I'll just share with you. By the way, there was a plague that was raging because there was all this disgusting behavior going on. And this was maybe an effort to also like pull the nation into some kind of, this has to stop. But 24,000 people were died in a plague that was, part of this whole craziness. And it also says in the Zohar that Pinchas was a reincarnation of Nadav and Avihu. So Nadav and Avihu, this is just throwing out another complicating factor, an overload of information, but Nadav and Avihu were sons of Aaron who brought strange fire that they weren't supposed to bring, and they kind of had some kind of an ODing experience. Their souls expired, and the people they died, bringing this strange fire. The way I always explain it is that the fire that they brought, this incense offering that was brought in while they were just beginning the consecration of this Mishkan, this tabernacle, it was too much light. They couldn't handle it. Their souls just went up and didn't come down. The only way I can understand it is to talk about it in context of a kind of overdose of light and, their souls going out of their body. But there is a source, and I am bringing it for you to contemplate and meditate and chew on, as we started off at the beginning about, one of the forms of meditation is to kind of think on things that you learned and try to see, what they can have application to you. That Pinchas was a reincarnation, and somehow Nadav and Avihu, when it comes to souls, they kind of one soul. And Pinchas, they had a kind of zeal as well that led them to do something extreme, but they died from their act of extremism because it was spirituality that kind of took them out of themselves. But this act of Pinchas was an act of zeal that was very much in the present world and somehow was something needed at the time to stop this hemorrhaging, in a way, of spiritual integrity that the people were facing at that time. And so his actions were zealous, but in a way, kind of almost like surgical. If a person cuts open another person and you say, what are you doing? You're cutting open the person. Well, I'm a doctor and I'm taking my scalpel and I'm cutting out, there's something very toxic here. I have to, execute a very, very radical act of intervention. So I just think that it's relevant for us because obviously all these stories are meant to help us have some kind of response. And I just think that, if we were standing there and we were watching what was happening, would we, and I'm people didn't meet Shulamit before. She's a new friend of mine, so I'm just going to give her a shout out. But Shulamit's a little bit of a zealot. She's online and, has very strong opinions to try and counteract the narratives that are out there that are so false. And Linda is an advocate and a zealous, because there's so many things now, and I've said this so many times, and I feel like this is maybe one of the fundamental aspects of the Shia, is that we're living in a time of so much sheker, so much untruth, so much brainwashing, so much, people being, given and fed such a diet of nonsense. And that, Linda does anti-Semitism. Every time there's an overt anti-Semitic thing or something absolutely, ridiculous, Linda will call it out and she'll step up and she'll speak about it. And Shulamit does that as well. She, is calling out things about health practices and things about, craziness about other other things where we're not getting truth and we're not exposed to truth. So Pinchas really was a zealot. And it's interesting to just see that this Parsha is dedicated to the fact that he did a very radical thing, but he took the knife, and he was a surgeon, and he jumped in and he said this apathy and this, going along with this whole thing. I mean, it was a complete plan, premeditated by Bilam, because he was paid by Balak. He was paid a huge amount of money to come up with a way to destroy the Jewish people. And he knew that the Jewish people are attached to Hashem. He knew that the Jewish people are attached to Hashem through their connection to the mitzvot, through their holiness, through their integrity as a family. And he was a very sly man. And it was his ideas in Egypt. There were 3 advisors to Pharaoh in Egypt. One is Yitro, who became the father-in-law of Moses. He changed his ways. One was Job, advising Pharaoh. And when Bilam spoke of his evil plans, Job kept quiet, and he was severely punished and suffered tremendously. And the last one was Bilam. Bilam was a really evil fellow, but somehow connected on high, had insight, had awareness, had a relationship to Hashem, but was totally immoral, sly, and disgusting. And it was his idea to derail the Jewish people, and he was having success. The Jewish men were falling like flies and being pulled into this until Pinchas stood up for his value system and did something very, very strong and definitive. I wanted to dedicate this class in memory of Linda's father, and I meant to do it at the beginning of the class. Linda, what was his Hebrew name? What is his Hebrew name?
His name was Lawrence Victor Vinocour. I don't know if they gave him a Hebrew name.
Lawrence Victor. So we don't know
What's his father's name?
Yeah, and we don't know
Arthur Carl Vinocour.
What was his father's name?
Arthur.
Well, Hashem knows who he is. And so we're dedicating the class in the memory of Lawrence Victor, the son of Arthur. If you can find out his Hebrew name, that would be good, because then you can do it. It's God knows who he is, but it's good if you can find out that name, and then you do mitzvot in his honor, or you give charity in his honor, and it should be for his benefit as a soul. And want to wish Ilana success. She's facing some challenges. That Ilana, give us your Hebrew name again.
Ilana Rachel Bat Esther Rosa.
Ilana Rachel Bas Esther Rosa should have success in all her efforts right now. A lot of needed for Yeshua, for Hashem's assistance, that she should have the results that she needs and wants. And if anyone has any other comments or questions, I'm ready to hear. We don't have too much time, so something brief. I would, Shalomit, did you want to say something else? Or Susan, or anyone else?
I do, but you know me. I'd like to let everyone go first because I already spoke once. So anybody who wants to say something, go first.
You know what struck me is when you were saying, how all these guys were being enticed into going against Hashem and against Judaism, and they fell for it. There's a word for that. They call it the un-Jew. I read that in Tablet because that's happening now like crazy, not just with men. It's happening with Jews. And basically it's like Jews who it's more important to them to have these have these political allies, or to be accepted by a particular political group, than it is to stand up for their own people, even in like life and death. In other words, very, like Jews who are siding with woke progressive nonsense and siding with SJP And I mean, there's a lot of Jews that actually ally themselves with the squad, the Hamas squad. You know, it's unbelievable. And those are the un-Jews. You know, you have people like J Street, Jews, what is it? Peace Now, Jews for, I don't know, whatever it is. It's all these groups, and they are the un-Jews. They're Jewish. They may consider themselves Jewish. They may know stuff about, you know, culture and religion. They may be members of a temple, usually a Reform temple, but they actually go against their own people.
Right. Well, the safe-hating Jew is a very well-known and old.
But it's not, yeah, I know, but it even goes beyond the self-hating. It's like, because they're anti-Semites. They're not just, it's not like they hate themselves. They're joining the anti-Semites' attack on Jews.
Yes.
Right.
Because that's more important to them. Like professors, a lot of professors, it's more important to them, Jewish professors, some, I mean, not obviously not all, to be accepted and invited by their colleagues and be invited to the dinner parties than it is to stand up for the facts and for truth.
Right.
You know, that would expose anti-Semitism.
So then I guess that we could put Pinchas as our new hero, you know. Don't forget Pinchas,
Pinchas.
you know, take a Pinchas stand. Let's make Pinchas buttons and Pinchas t-shirts. Yay, Pinchas. You know, because I think you're right, Jews sell out. And in this climate and in this environment and in our nation and our world today, you can see from knowing what you know about the world, you can actually picture what was going on there was just a whole selling out, and then it took Pinchas. Yes. So maybe a good question is, what is your Pinchas move? You know, what is your Pinchas move? Like, you know,
maybe
how
we
can
need to start a Pinchas organization.
I love it. I love it. It's fantastic.
Nonprofit Pinchas.
Yeah.
We're gonna make pins. We're gonna get together and make pins.
Yeah, make pins. Be a Pinchas Jew.
Yeah.
Be a Pinchas Jew. You know, make Hashem happy. Be a Pinchas Jew.
I'm just going to say this as just very, very, very short that, you know, you always talk about the what's going on in the world in the Parsha of the week. So who is in the news today? Cosby. And why? For very low life behavior and going and people getting mixed up, a judge getting mixed up about like the law protecting women, getting confused, and then the laws being not honored. But find that fascinating. Cosby.
You know, we are living in a time of unprecedented opportunity, unprecedented shifting, unprecedented opportunities for growth, but we're also living in a time of unprecedented manipulation of truth. And so it becomes more and more important to, you know, not be just swept away in this kind of sewage stream of just like blah, 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 and to like, no, this is like, you know, and I think that this is part of the Messianic era that I've heard it explained in so many different ways, that things get thrown up onto the table to be exposed so that they can be dealt with. And now lots of sheker is, you know, falsehood, are being exposed. But in the process of them being exposed, a lot of people are still vulnerable to that sheker, and it's kind of, it's like a web, an insidious web that's entrapping many, many people. So as it's becoming exposed, you know, people have to, it's part of what's the task now, is to separate between truth and untruth, even in your own mind, to just be, you know, clear in the pursuit of truth. And that's why I think Torah has a lot to say in helping us. No, it's not a compassionate thing to deprive a person of food if they're in the hospital, even if they are 80 years old. That's not compassion. If you thought it was compassion because, oh, they don't have quality of life anymore. Oh, you know, we need the bed for someone else. No, not true. You're wrong. Look at Torah and it'll tell you that that's absolutely not true. That's not compassion. It's not compassionate.
But it gets complex.
What?
There's more gray than that, I think.
Well, that's why there's a halacha. That's why when you don't know and it's a complicated situation, you ask, but there is a guideline. We don't just make this stuff up. what we think is compassionate. Oh, it's compassionate to allow a 12-year-old to get a gender operation because, she thought she was a boy all her life. No, that's not compassionate. That's child abuse. Somebody has to tell you somehow, some way, what's what. People don't know. So I feel that, Torah has a bigger place in the world now than ever before, because there's so much confusion, and what's true and not true is so kind of up for grabs, that I think, locating oneself in Torah study is a great path to sanity and clarity. I guess that's a good closing statement.
Thank you so
Brenda.
much. So good to be back.
Yeah, and so just introducing Shulamit, she came to me for Pesach, and we became bonded ever since. So
I hope she keeps coming back.
yeah, we hope you keep coming back. Okay, have a good night,
night,
everyone.
everybody.
Nice meeting you too.
Nice
Sei
meeting you.
gesund, as they say. Good night, good night.
Good night.
Good night, thank you.
There's another one of me.